Good morning, campers. I, Susan Check, am on a boat on a lake. Or am I? Susan, why have you come here? Don't tell them. Don't tell them. Don't tell them. Act normal. Gosh, campers, what a season it's already been. Everything that's happened this year. I don't know one side from the other. We're moving on, though, aren't we? Last week's monster, was that even real? Did I fight it? Did I kill? No, I can't think that. That was another life. I'm all better now. You know something, campers? I think I might let Camp Counselor Duncan take care of things around here this week. Him and Emily. They'll do it. They'll take care of everything. Does he love her? More than me? Susan. Duncan. Wait, is he? Did I? Is this blood on my hand? I sit here and I can't believe this camp is real. And yet I have to believe it. Dreams or nightmares? Madness or sanity? I don't know which is which. Susan, stay sane and stay alive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bunk 237, a horror movie podcast. I am one of your hosts, Robin Zlotnick.
Hey, I'm the other host, Tuyet Nguyen. You can call me Tuyet. And our guest today is my long-distance friend that I see in person once every 2 to 3 years or so, the very funny Judah Friedlander. Hi, Judah.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for having me on your really cool podcast. I don't do a lot of these, so this is fun for me.
Oh, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
on.
for being here.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Judah, what have you been up to in the last 12 to 24 months?
Yes, so normally when there's not a pandemic, I'm touring doing stand-up comedy, or I'm at home in New York City doing stand-up comedy pretty much every night. And when I'm on the road, I usually do about a 70 to 90 minute set. And when I'm in the city, I usually do 2 to 4 shows a night, but each show is about 15 minutes. So during the pandemic, I've been doing online shows on Zoom, which I didn't know existed before the pandemic. And I have the shows interactive, so I can still do crowd work and lots of new material. And so, my act is jokes, crowd work, satire, all on, basically fighting for human rights and satirizing the state of the nation, the state of the world, and all its corruption and oppression of human rights and all that stuff. So heavy topics, but comedy.
Sounds hilarious.
But so I'm doing about 2 to 3 of those a week, and I usually do about a 90-minute or longer set.
And you've been doing those all pandemic, I've noticed, right? Like you've been pretty consistently.
Yeah, I'm not doing shows at venues just yet. I'm just starting to look into that stuff, but I'm not doing that just yet. So I'm still doing the online shows. They're all pay what you want, and each show is like 90 minutes to 2 hours.
That's great.
Very
How
cool.
can we find out that information on your...
Well, I'm really unorganized, so if my website's updated, judahfriedlander.com will have the info. And then on Twitter and Instagram, every week I post when my shows are. And that's on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Judah World Champ. So that's JUDAH World Champ.
Very cool. How are you finding the Zoom shows?
They work great, and in some ways it's almost more intimate than performing at a venue because there's no distraction from a bar. Or,
right.
You're not being forced to buy 2 overpriced drinks. You don't have to worry about people who are loud and drunk sitting in front of you or next to you. And instead of me, like, seeing everyone in the venue where we're at, I'm actually seeing into people's homes. So it's actually really cool. So the shows are really good. They're actually surprisingly intimate.
Awesome.
So it works. It's a little different, but it's also almost exactly the same. Yeah.
Very cool.
So.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the sort of psychological view into a person's home. Because
a transition.
I feel like
So smooth.
that would be a great way to segue into the movie that we're watching this week.
Yeah, you just softballed it to me. That was perfect. Yes. This week we watched Let's Scare Jessica to Death, the 1971 film co-written and directed by John D. Hancock. It stars Zora Lampert as Jessica, who has recently been released from a psychiatric institution and moves in with her husband and their friend to a spooky old house in Connecticut, as one does.
Is that why you moved to Connecticut?
Yeah, everyone always moves to Connecticut and lives in a spooky house after a mental break. No, just kidding about that last part. Of course, things start getting spooky real fast thanks to a mysterious squatter and a town potentially full of vampires. It's a very gothic, kind of lyrical movie that I found very interesting and wonderful because you never really find out what's true and what's not, what happened and what didn't. So my first question to both of you is, I feel like the title, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, promises a very different movie than what you ultimately get when you watch it. So I'm wondering how you felt the first time you watched the movie, what your history with that is, what you thought you were going to watch, and how it squared with the actual movie.
I did sort of cheat a little bit. I watched it for the first time for this podcast, and I did read a little synopsis of it before. So, and the synopsis, like the basic synopsis, always kind of alludes to a possible vampire story. And so I was expecting like a very kind of straightforward like vampire story, and I kind of kept waiting for that to come. And it didn't. And you're right, the title is like a little kooky, right? The title kind of sounds like one of these like modern satirical like meta horror movies.
Yeah, I first came upon this movie, I don't know, I'm guessing 20 some years ago, and it was on regular TV late at night, and I'm just kind of flicking the channels, and I come into it not knowing what it is, sort of somewhere mid-movie, and I was like, oh, this is legitimately scary and creepy. Like, there's not really any gore, but it's scary. And it's like, because the lead character, Jessica, she keeps thinking she's seeing these ghosts, or are they vampires or something. And then, I guess it's her husband, I think, and friend are like, we think you're... maybe, you need to get back to New York and go back to the mental institution. Maybe so it's like you just don't know. But I kind of think like Jessica's right. It's like these everyone thinks like, oh, she's crazy, but I'm like, no, I think she's right. She's really seeing vampires, and you guys are really in danger. So it's almost like gaslighting. It's almost like
totally
like 20 years ago, I'd never even heard of that term, gaslighting. But you watch it now, and you're like, oh, so this is like, so it makes it almost even scarier than many horror movies you see, where you're like, oh, here's the crazy, boogeyman who's trying to get you. But here you're like, well, I don't know. Everyone's saying it's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
100%. I had the same sort of thing where I think I had heard of the title of the movie before, but hadn't watched it. And for the entire movie, was expecting the other shoe to drop, and for it to come out that her husband and the friend had been planning this whole thing, or that the whole town was in on it somehow and we're trying to make her look crazy. And then when the ending happens and you just don't know what's real, I was like, oh, this movie is legit. Like, this is terrifying.
I felt very similarly because it was like, it's so good at leading you on and leading you on and leading you on and leading you on. And then it like gets into this cool circular movie where it's like, it like kind of goes back to the beginning and you're like, what the hell just happened? But it was absolutely like, I think that the continuous lead on is also kind of what makes it so scary, right? And aside from just the tone of the movie, soundtrack is incredible. The acting is very good. But the whole movie is like mood. It's all mood, and it's really messed up that they don't tell you what is real.
Well, I think that's, it's almost like life, and if you think about it, in the movie, it's, first of all, the movie came out in 1971. So, and it's basically a few people, probably they were, fairly well off financially, living in Manhattan, and probably at least one or two of them a little hippie-ish would be the term, I think, at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're moving into some dinky little small town, and they even, what's interesting, they even refer to it in the movie when they meet one of the people in the town who years ago lived in the city. I think it was the antique shop owner. And he says, oh, yeah, a lot of you city folk, you move out here after a while to escape the city life,
Yeah.
And in a lot of these towns, I mean, even look at it today, like small town America versus big city America. And then you look at that cultural dynamic, politically, economically, so that alone can be scary. There's a scene where they're first going into town, and it's all old guys, and they're all just staring at them, and then being kind of aggressive towards them.
Yeah,
like
weird.
Kind of like almost kind of threatening violence. So even if you didn't think there might be any kind of a vampire situation going on, that's still a scary scenario. So it's like kind of scary either way. And I just love how the movie uses so much, as you were saying, with like the visuals and then also with the audio, so much with sound.
Yes.
And how it really just provides this mood throughout the whole thing, and just general just creepiness. Well, like with pretty much no gore, but yet there's not even hardly any yelling in the movie. I don't even know if there is yelling in the movie.
Right.
And it's still scary,
Hello, my name is Bob Vander from the Connecticut Tourism Board, and I wanted to take a brief moment from this obviously hilarious and fun podcast that you should definitely head on over to Apple Podcasts and write a 5-star review about, to tell you that not all of Connecticut is haunted. Just so you know, most of it. We have beautiful beaches, parks, and we put clams on pizza. The state of Connecticut can neither confirm nor deny the number of apparitions associated with pizza. So, as we say here in the Nutmeg State, yeah, someone probably died there.
There's a little bit of like a hysterical Jessica moment, right, towards the end when she's like in the when she's in bed with her husband and she's like
yes.
So hard theater acting for sure. In that scene, but it's good. It's so good. I had a badge that was the bad vibes badge that I wanted to award the film for, whether like intentionally or not, really setting that mood for bad vibes just across the board. Like, I mean, those townspeople that are all old men right away is weird. They show up in a hearse. That's weird. They leave like the comfort of the city. That's weird. She's like coming down off of this like mental breakdown, and she's like trying to escape to the country, which is fine. But also that just feels like, oh, this can't end well. Like
there's
it's like
a creepy ferry operator.
Creepy ferry operator? Yeah, totally. I also had, actually this is probably a related badge, probably a companion badge, which is the fishing badge for like all of the red herrings. Because like every single scene was like a red herring. Like,
and it all just like makes you question what Jessica is making up in her head and what's actually real. And some of the things that you think can't possibly be real end up being real somehow. That ghost girl, who you see a couple times and then she runs away.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like tackling her in a field.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she actually is there.
Yeah.
I loved how confusing that was.
That's one thing I like about the movie, where it's like I really think Jessica is not crazy. She's like I really think all these things that these myths, these things they allude to are actually real with the vampires and all.
Because why would all the old men be wearing bandages?
See, I did think she was crazy. At the end of it, I thought that especially when it shows her like killing her husband, and he's like in the water. I was like, oh, this is kind of like a psychological thriller where it was her all along, and she is like. I mean, I wasn't convinced that they were really vampires. That part I definitely thought was like in her head.
Isn't technically everyone in the town a vampire though?
I think.
I mean, anyone who's bitten by a vampire
becomes a vampire.
Right.
That's what I assumed. Yeah.
Right. So basically, everyone's a vampire.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting about these vampires is that Emily, Abigail, whatever, the 100-year-old vampire lady.
Is that the squatter?
Yeah, the squatter.
Uses a knife to cut them open and then drinks their blood.
Yeah.
She doesn't bite them like a vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no fangs in the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
And they also are all like hanging out in the daytime. Like it doesn't stick to vampire lore. It doesn't stick to traditional vampire lore.
It's just another like unsettling.
Yeah, they're just weird small townspeople is kind of what I thought. But it was weird that the town was all older men and then like 2 young women. There was like no
all
in between.
Old white dudes.
Yeah.
Terrifying, basically.
Yeah. I have a badge for the sound, going back to what you mentioned before, Judah, because it like blew my mind the second time that I watched the movie, how much the sound contributed to the like feeling of like total Jessica. Like disorientation. Like, there was like her inner monologue, which I thought was so well done, and like her narration, and then like all the voices that she's hearing. But then there are like little tiny things, like there's a scene where she's upstairs in the window looking down on her husband and Emily, and she's like suspicious of them, and he gets in the car, and then Emily talks to him, and she's hearing the conversation, but it sounds like they're right there. It doesn't sound like they're far away.
Right.
It doesn't sound like they're, down a flight of stairs. And you're like, okay, so she's probably making up this entire conversation.
That's a great observation. And I think it also, this film is not filmed in the kind of cookie cutter way movies are filmed today.
Right.
Where it's, you watch so many movies or TV shows and you can't tell who directed it. There's no personal style to it, and this movie is, you're not going to see the exact same camera angles and also, like you said, like, doing something interesting with the sound.
Yeah. It is John D. Hancock's directorial debut.
Yeah.
But when he got the script, it was initially conceived. It was a completely different film originally. The original script was supposed to be a satirical horror film about a group of hippies preyed upon by a monster in the lake. And the original title was It Drinks Hippie Blood.
Which, like, to be fair, I would like to see that movie as
I would also watch that movie. I would totally watch It Drinks Hippie Blood. Absolutely. I think that
sounds
someone
like a
should make that movie.
low-budget kind of exploitation film.
Right.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I think that maybe that was
great.
The kind of way they were going. But then Hancock got his hands on it and was like, I will do this, but I'm going to change everything in this movie. He kept a few things from the original, but he really turned it into this much more serious, thematic, creepy, like horror movie that it is. And I think that's fantastic. And especially
hired a lot of theater actors that he'd worked with before. Like, I felt like all the performances were so good.
Yeah, the lead actor, she's very strong and really carries it.
I had a badge for the lead performance, and that's the unreliable narrator badge.
Absolutely.
So good. And I feel like it's really kind of different from a regular unreliable narrator, because she questions her own sanity the entire time.
Yeah.
And you're just like right there with her.
I also like that there are some things that happen in the movie that the characters take as totally normal, and I, looking at it, I'm like, wait, what? Why would anyone do that? You know, and yet I don't know. There's something classic about movies where, I mean, sometimes when the characters do dumb things, you know, you're like, all right, this movie sucks. This is stupid. But then sometimes you're like, you know what? This is perfect. They really needed to do something stupid there, and now we're in a great horror movie situation.
What was something normal in the film that seemed weird to you?
Here's one. Well, first of all, a couple things. So I guess Jessica and her husband bought this house, and they're bringing along a friend, I guess because there's a farm there too, and they're going to try to get the farm going, but none of them have ever farmed. It sounds like they don't know anything about farming.
No.
And it sounds like Jessica's never even seen the house before. I don't even know if the husband has seen the house before. It seems like they somehow just bought a house that's furnished, and they've all in part of the movie they talk about how they've given up their jobs, so they have no money. So their only way to get money in the meantime is to try to sell things they find in the house. Like, I've never heard of anyone buying a house
being a hippie.
totally furnished, and their plan is to just start a garage sale and take stuff from their house to the local antique shop and see if they want to buy it.
Yeah.
They're not even doing a garage sale. They're just trying to sell it to someone else to sell it.
Yeah.
So that was weird, I thought. And then just like you know, they're driving a hearse. They have a hearse that they drive, and apparently that's because that was a cheaper thing to buy.
Right.
And then like along the way, they're driving by a cemetery. Jessica's first instinct, well, one, she's just elated that she sees a cemetery. Most people don't. Like I don't have a problem with cemeteries, but a lot of people get creeped out by cemeteries. But I used to live basically across the street from a cemetery for years, so I was never like. I was always kind of used to that, but
did you ever go and do a grave like headstone rubbings?
I don't think I did that, but she does that. She
and then
does
decorate your bedroom.
She does
with
that and decorates her bedroom
with people's headstones.
Right, and then so most people don't do that, and then when they get to the house, and I think at this point in the movie you already know that Jessica was in a mental institution,
right?
And then when they get to the house, you see some like figure move upstairs, and it's like a scary moment in the movie. You know, as a viewer, you're thinking Jessica's seeing things again.
Right.
And then immediately her husband is like, he goes, I saw it. So you're like, oh, okay. So this is not Jessica being crazy. This is something she actually saw. And there actually is someone there. And then there's like a very tense moment where they try to chase and find this person. And then the person says they've just been squatting and living there. And then Jessica and her husband just decide, well, she should just stay there.
Yeah.
I don't think most people would buy a house sight unseen, completely furnished, and then it actually comes with someone living in it, and you're just cool with that person living in it.
I think it was that Jessica was trying so hard to be cool about everything. And I think she was the one who suggested that.
Because she was like, I think she was really trying to balance herself. And especially because it seems like her relationship with her husband, because her husband seems overall very supportive, right? Like he quit his job so that they could move to the country, seemingly for her health.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that. Right.
Yeah, because he played played with the New York Philharmonic, and I do like that scene, that early scene that you mentioned, Judah, where he's like, I saw that too, just to reassure her, because I think, you know, as the partner of someone who has been going through this like really traumatic series of events in her life, I think he understood that like how she would react to that. And that was like kind of a nice moment to show that he was like a good partner and a good husband. But I will say, a lot of that outside of that did not make any sense.
Also, this movie predates when the movie Halloween came out, which I believe was late 70s.
Yeah.
And then you had that, you know, sort of heyday of horror films in the early 80s.
Yeah.
This predates that as a not just, you know, by time, but culturally.
We didn't have quite entered into slasher era yet. So I think in this movie, in this world, these characters don't have anything to be afraid of, right?
Right.
And there's just this sort of safe-looking woman who's been squatting in the house that they just bought. And everyone is very, very chill with that.
Yeah.
chill with that and chill with her like lack of backstory. And they're like, how long have you been here? And she's like, oh, for ages. And they just accept that
Yeah.
and move on.
You're right. Yeah, they know nothing about her.
Yeah.
And this is just because she's like a safe-looking white woman.
Could be.
I thought she was immediately creepy.
You know, she did sort of have she had a good, like, kind of possible vampire look, right?
Totally.
Also,
Right.
just her confidence level. It's like you're in a house that people already bought, so you're not the owner, and you're completely confident. Just like she always felt at home. Like she never felt like, oh, maybe I'm intruding. You know, it was like very comfortable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Just slid right in
The
there.
blonde woman by the river there, the water there. What was the backstory on that character again? Because I'm not quite remembering.
I don't think there was one, and I think I read that was like a character and a scene that was like left over from the original script. That he was like, I don't really know why
I
that's
thought
in there,
the antique dealer said some story about a girl who drowned and she still haunts the area.
I think that's supposed to be Emily, like the vampire.
See,
Yeah.
I thought
Because
Emily was maybe the woman who had just been living there for hundreds of years.
I think that story at the antique store is supposed, especially when they show the photo, and I think it is her in the photo.
Oh, it's Emily, you mean?
Yeah, it's Emily in
Okay, I
the
couldn't
photo. At the very least, I'm pretty sure it's the actor in the photo dressed to look a little bit different.
Is that the same one when Jessica's up in the attic and she's looking at an old photo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
But I will say it's all very vague, and this is just what I think they're trying to do.
Right.
It's somehow because everything was so nonsensical in a way. Like I liked it. I accepted it.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing.
Totally.
I was along for the ride. Whatever happened,
Yeah.
Totally.
I was fine.
Another thing that kind of like that got me was the I have a badge for it, the mole mouse badge for the creature that they find, that they go, oh, it's a mole and it's 100% a mouse.
Yes.
And she's like, it doesn't have any eyes, and then they show you its eyes. and for a second I was like, is this like part of the gaslighting that's going on in the movie?
Oh.
And then I found out that they just couldn't afford a mole, and so they used a mouse instead.
Okay.
Apparently, if you get the Shout Factory DVD or Blu-ray release, there's a director's commentary where the director and maybe the composer have a heated argument about what happened with the mole and the mouse.
Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I haven't actually listened to it, but
Another scary moment in the movie for me is when they first go into the town. And first of all, it's just all old white dudes. And they obviously don't have jobs, or nobody's working. It's like, I don't know how there's any economy in this town. And they just surround the car. You know, it's like, it reminds me of like, like the Night of the Living Dead a little bit, where like they're all moving slow. These are all old men,
yes.
but there's something just terrifying about them. And then at one point, so they're surrounding the car, and then when Jessica's husband gets out, one of the guys who's standing right there, they don't get out of the way, so he kind of has to move around them. One of the guys he doesn't hit him, he just takes his hand and he just sort of like pats him on the top of his head. and it was like nothing that's going to hurt the guy, but it's just like sending a message where it's like, I can do anything to you and you're not going to stop me, kind of a thing. It was like a dare kind of a thing.
Yeah.
To see if he would like fight back or something. It was just like, that was like just stuff like that. And then when you just see these shots where it's just like all the guys have these, scars on their necks, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And then you have to take a ferry to get there. It's like you can't even drive there. It's like this isolated, time warp of a place. It's just terrifying. That
There is something about the fact that they're all sort of older white men, just slow moving, that's somehow scarier than if they just like all showed up with axes, Just the fact that like I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, there's an
all.
intimidation factor.
Yeah. Even though I could probably push them over, I don't know. They seem kind of
Intimidation
frail.
can be scarier than a flat out violent act.
And in that same scene, when Jessica returns to the car and they just don't get out of her way, it's like an uncomfortably long shot of her just like trying to walk around them.
Yeah.
And it's so weird and uncomfortable.
Robin, did you think that they were vampires, or did you think it was all in Jessica's head?
That's a good question. I think the movie leaves it up to interpretation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think they're vampires. I'm Team Jessica. I think she's right the whole way. I think she's fine. I don't think she's crazy. I think maybe she's the only sane one around. But
I think I kind of landed on, yes, they're a vampire. Like everything happened.
Yeah.
Like I think she killed her husband at the end.
She
You think
definitely
Jessica
killed her husband. I think she killed her husband.
oh wait, I'm not even remembering this. What happens
When
at
she
the
gets
end
in
there?
the
I'm not
boat at
remembering
the end, she's trying to like escape, I guess, across the lake, and a hand reaches up over the end, and she takes like some sort of like fish hook thing and just starts like going at it, and then he turns over and it's Duncan.
Yeah, it's her
this.
husband.
Oh, it's her husband.
Yeah.
I think that she did accidentally kill him,
Right.
Because thinking that he was a threat. But then the question is, maybe he was a threat because we don't know, because we don't actually know if they were.
Right.
Well, he was a vampire at that point though, because he had been bitten.
Was he?
hadn't
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, he was.
Right,
Yes,
because
he
there was
definitely
that scene when Jessica made him sleep on the couch because she was worried, and then Emily comes and seduces him and then turns him into a vampire. But again, I'm not totally convinced that there were any real vampires in this.
Here's an argument for vampires. Besides Emily, Jessica was the only other woman in the town.
Mm-hmm.
So she needed to get rid of her.
Yeah, that was one depressing town.
It was a super
But I think
depressing
Emily
town.
has just eliminated all the other female threats that there had been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
know,
she's
throughout
kind of
history.
the queen vampire of this little town.
But what if it was all in Jessica's head and there were women, but she just didn't see them? Do you know what I mean? Like, what if, because we're
that could
seeing
be.
everything from Jessica's perspective, and because we essentially, as the viewer, are Jessica. We don't know what's real, what's not.
Right.
We just got out of the mental institution.
At the end of the movie, I also had a thought that was like, what if she's still in a psychiatric institution? Like, what if none of this happened?
Right, the movie could have ended that way with
Yeah.
her in the psych
Right.
ward, and you'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, this makes sense, but it
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. Does Jessica get bit by Emily in it or no?
I don't think so.
No, they do have a little bit of a queer moment in the lake, which affirms the theory that all vampires are queer. I stand by that.
I didn't know that was a theory.
I stand by that.
But there is that scene at the end when Jessica is in bed with Duncan and he's a vampire already, and Emily's all the old men are somehow in their room now. And
Yeah.
like
Oh,
kind
right.
of
They're all, like,
encroaching in on
coming-
them,
yeah, yeah.
and it looks like they're trying to like transform Jessica into a vampire. But I think she gets out in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what if that was all in her head?
I think it all happened. I think that town is still there. And don't fucking go there.
Is all of Connecticut like this, Robin?
It was filmed in Connecticut, not too far from where I live right now.
Yeah, if anyone lives in a big city, like if you live in New York and you get some random offer to buy some house in Connecticut that you can only get by driving your car onto a tiny boat, and then that boat drives you and your car to this dinky town. It's just all old dudes. Just fucking get the fuck out of here.
Leave. But also, cost of living though was probably a lot cheaper back then.
Oh, I'm sure it was,
you
yeah.
probably could have, saved a little money from playing in the New York Philharmonic to like buy a house in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess
Yeah, you guys are East Coast people.
when the only way you can get to a town is by a boat that can take one car at a time, and everyone there is a vampire. The
One car
houses
at a
are
time.
cheap. Houses are cheap.
Yeah.
So.
I have a question, and maybe we already answered it, but I had one question. What is this movie about?
I mean, I can make an argument that it's about. It looks at gaslighting. It looks like do people believe you, and are your friends really your friends? And what is the truth?
Yeah. I also think it's about mental illness, relationships, and how mental illness affects relationships with, loved ones and whatnot.
The idea that she is a hysterical wife going into the institution and having to be supported by her husband, and then them having to upend their whole life to support her, and her kind of still dealing with that, because they also never talk about what her, if there was a trauma that brought her to this point. Like her backstory, their whole backstory is just, it starts right in the middle of it.
She briefly mentions that her father died or passed away.
Yeah.
And she was feeling really tired. But that's the only mention that she makes.
I guess that means she's crazy.
Right.
And that's
She
the
was
thing.
upset her dad died, put her in a mental institution.
The hysterical wife thing, I actually had a badge for this. Is the grin and bear it badge. Because Jessica is smiling throughout almost the whole movie, but it's this like
You're right.
pained, like she's trying so hard to
She
be
really is.
chill and cool and make everyone happy and come off as like this, nurturing wife, mother, whatever character, when she's so struggling and she shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. I think she feels really guilty that
Yes.
she had a mental breakdown, which is messed up.
Yeah, she's actually she's very aware.
Yeah.
She's very aware.
Yeah.
Which also lends to your argument that she's not crazy.
Totally.
Like, oh, you guys really just changed my whole mind about this. I was like, she's not crazy. Everyone else around her is making her feel crazy.
I don't know. Maybe we're saying this is a better movie than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Maybe this
Ooh, that's a big statement.
Maybe this
that's
is
I
movie
support
is-
that.
dealing with psychology and from a society and state level and government level, and with psychology and how that's used against women to try to disempower women. You know?
Now that you're saying that, also sort of considering that it is titled "Let's Scare Jessica to Death," like that whole title is just like gaslighting her and like kind of pranking her and putting aggressively like putting her through something, as opposed to sort of the other way where she's experienced things.
Maybe that's the state of New York City and the state of Connecticut coming together to say, sorry, Jessica, you can't escape New York City's mental institution and go to another state and try to think you're a sane person.
Yeah.
They're going to beat you down and label you as insane.
Yeah, I do think that there's an
true.
interesting subtext of sort of the country versus the city, and sort of, the sort of city madness making you have to run away to the country.
Right. People think it's going to solve all their problems to leave New York City.
Maybe the theme of this movie is don't move out of New York City. Like if you're in New York City, just stay there. As bad as it gets, just fucking stay. Don't go.
Robin, you got to move out of Connecticut.
Clearly. It's the most haunted place.
Yeah, maybe it's just an absolute gaslight of Connecticut. Just a condemnation of Connecticut.
Don't move out of New York City, and also don't move to Connecticut. Bad things happen in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is if you buy a house,
Look at it first.
look at it first. And if someone says they've been living in there for ages, believe them. Well, let's talk about another big issue, which both of you brought up earlier that we touched on a little bit that I didn't even realize. If these are vampires, and they're called vampires in the movie by at least one of the characters, and as the two of you said, they're not bothered by daylight, this is a big issue that needs to be discussed. I mean, this is maybe a breed of vampires we've not been taught about that have no preference for day or night.
Yeah, daywalkers.
And, blood drinkers that don't need fangs to do it. They'll just use kitchen utensils to do it.
Yeah.
So they can blend in more with society. Now, depending if you're pro-vampire or anti-vampire, this can be a big problem. Maybe this movie deserves a badge for being a rule breaker. Maybe this
Yeah.
Yes.
And it makes it almost extra unsettling because now you don't know the rules anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I will say there are absolutely no rules at all in this movie. I can't, they kept presenting scenarios.
I mean, is it a mole or is it a mouse? What's the truth?
Right?
Is it a vampire? Is it a human? What's the truth? Is she insane or is she sane? What's the truth? Who do you trust?
Ooh, I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I trust you on the recommendation of this movie.
Yeah,
I trust both of you.
seriously.
I trust both of you. What if I turned around right now and I had a scar on my neck? Like after watching this movie, it's like I'm gonna look at people's necks after watching this movie.
Right?
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's like, all right, I want to make sure. What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, Judah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having
What
me.
a-
Always fun
This was
to
awesome.
watch a good movie and discuss it with good people.
Yeah, what an excellent movie choice. Thank you so much for bringing this
Yeah,
to us.
seriously. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, I was trying to, think of a movie that I mean, I think it's a fairly well-known movie, but it's also a movie that's really not that well-known. So I was like, I'm trying to think of, all right, what's a good movie, a movie that I like that we can discuss, and maybe it hasn't been discussed a lot, like I said, I'm a little out of the loop on things, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. It'd probably been 15 or so years since I'd seen it, and I rewatched it about a week or two ago.
Yeah, I'm
That's so good.
so glad to have watched this movie, and
Yeah.
we'll definitely be telling other people about it. Say, like on this
Awesome.
podcast that we're on
Cool.
right now.
Yeah, right.
Hey guys, if you haven't seen Let's Scare Jessica to Death,
Seriously, watch it.
seriously, watch it. Again, Judah, thanks so much for coming on. How do we find you on the internet? How do we find you in the world?
With the pandemic, I've been doing shows online. One of these days, I'll get back to touring and doing shows at venues. But I'm going to continue doing the shows online, because one thing that's fun about the stand-up shows online is that people from all over the world can come together
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
watch something. So you can, and I can even have other comics on the show who are in other parts of the world. So it's fun. So I'm not going to do them as often as I have been doing them during the pandemic, but I'm still going to be doing them. You can hear about them on my website, judahfriedlander.com, or I post them I announce when the shows are on Twitter and Instagram. The shows are done on Zoom, but I have it in a way so the audience has the option of leaving their cameras on or their microphones on, so they can interact with me and I can interact with them. Or you can watch it with your camera off and your microphone off and just watch it, not partake in it. So you have the choice. And all the shows are pay what you want. They're all about 2 hours, and I do about 1 to 3 of them a week.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Very cool.
Check it out.
We're really bad at ending the podcast.
I know.
It's all good. I think this is good.
Right? Is this where we end it? Jessica.
I'm in your blood.
Did this happen? Did any of this happen?
Bunk 237, a horror movie podcast, stars Tuyet and Robin Zlotnick as the final girls of Bunk 237, and introducing Alex Skoke as camp director Susan Check. The show is produced by me, Shane Segretti. Our theme song is written and performed by Dan Zlotnick, and our outro music is written and performed by Axe Slasher. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and it may be featured on an upcoming episode. Have a badge of your own for this movie? Follow us on Instagram at Bunk237Pod and Twitter at Bunk237, and let us know. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded.